Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome to a video that hopefully you all have been anticipating for a while because it is a video that you voted for in my poll that I put up a few weeks ago. And this of course is my video about the Odyssey and about how my expectations for the Odyssey compared to the realities of reading it. Now, this is kind of a unique one for this series because this recent read through of the Odyssey that I did was actually a reread, so I thought it would be helpful to talk through both my expectations for my original read through of the Odyssey and then my expectations and realities of rereading it, because I think this is probably the position that quite a few of you may be in, where you read the Odyssey a long time ago, probably for school or something, and maybe you're thinking about reading it again, but your memories of it are a little bit fuzzy and you're not really sure what to expect from a reread if you decide to do that. So I'll walk you through my experience with that, and you can decide if this sounds like something that you want to give another try if you've already given it a try in the past. So first off, before I read the Odyssey at all, I had heard quite a bit about it through books about writing or screenwriting, because it frequently gets mentioned as this very foundational hero's journey story, this voyage and return story that really was very formative for Western civilization and the way that we tell stories, especially adventure stories and hero's journey stories. So I was kind of expecting an ancient version of one of those swashbuckling 1950s movies where everything is a little bit silly, a little bit over the top, kind of strange, but you also just can't look away. There's something sort of fascinating about it. That's kind of what I had in mind for the Odyssey. And I also felt like it was going to have just, I don't know, this glowing aura of heroism and classicness and ancientness and nobility or something, where the hero finds all kinds of cool stuff and discovers new lands and defeats the monsters, and then at the end safely returns home, but forever changed. So then the realities of reading this for the first time, and it was kind of unique because if you've watched the other videos in this series, you know that my typical experience with classics is that when I read them, they're actually far more interesting than I thought that they were going to be, but I wouldn't really say that was the case with the Odyssey. The first time that I read it, I was pretty interested in the first couple of chapters because it was about Telemachus and how he wanted to find out what had happened to his missing father, and he was leaving on this journey to find out what had happened to Odysseus and all this cool stuff. I thought Penelope was an interesting character, so I got pretty invested in it up front. And then, slight spoilers, but Telemachus is basically the protagonist for the first few chapters, and then for the next several chapters he's not even in it, and then he goes back to being basically a side character for the rest of the story. So I wasn't really prepared for that transition. I didn't understand how the book sort of broke up into different sections, so that threw me off a little bit when it transitioned to Odysseus' story. And another kind of unexpected thing about this book is that all of the really famous and iconic episodes from it happen in chapters 9 through 12. So just this one small section of the book, all the really famous stuff happens. Like that's where the Cyclops is, that's the Sirens, that's Scylla and Charybdis, that's Circe and Calypso, that's the trip to Hades. So like all of the stuff that you've probably heard of as being in the Odyssey is not evenly scattered throughout the book. It's just in chapters 9 to 12. So that section is pretty interesting and crazy and fantastical. And then after that, it feels kind of like, okay, where are all the monsters now? And outside of those parts, the Odyssey is surprisingly focused on these more small-scale family matters. It's all about Odysseus coming home, and he is a warrior. He's coming home from the war. He's technically a king, although like of a city-state versus, he's not the king of all of Greece or anything. He's basically the king of this one island. So there is a national element to everything that's going on here, but really the point of the story is that he's a husband and father trying to get home, and it's about his relationship with his wife and his son. It's about what's going on within his own household. And there's a lot of content just about everyday life in Ithaca at the time that I wasn't really expecting. So it's not this big sweeping battle epic, or even in some cases a big sweeping adventure story, because like half of it happens actually on Odysseus's home island. Again, not much of it is actually about all of his crazy voyages. So it feels a lot more grounded and down to earth than the Iliad does in some ways. So definitely not this glow and aura of heroism and classicness like I was expecting for sure. I mean, there are jokes about baldness, there are lower forms of humor, there's a lot of pretty funny stuff and silly stuff and crazy stuff that that modern scholars and commentators don't even really know what to do with. And yes, it is true that this is a major foundation of Western civilization and storytelling and everything, but it's not really the classic hero's journey the way that I understand it. It's certainly not a coming of age story like your classic Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter kind of hero's journey, which is how I think of that terminology. It's not a story about youth, it's a story about middle age. And I think about the experience of being middle-aged in a lot of ways, actually. Not that I know from firsthand experience what it's like to be middle-aged, but especially given the introductory materials that are in this edition, I think that is what's going on. So I read this for the first time at the end of 2020, and my goal with that read-through was just to get a cursory understanding of the basic plot and the main characters and what even goes on in the book. And my idea was to come back to it later and to study it more in depth once I had just experienced the whole thing all the way through as a unified story. So I came back to the Odyssey earlier this year, and that brings me to my second set of expectations. And it was definitely a cool experience to read this for the second time. I remembered a lot of things that I had forgotten and noticed a lot of things that I had missed, and I think started to understand some things a lot better than the first time. I mean, everything that I just told you about the realities of reading it the first time, I would not have been able to articulate that after the first time that I read it, but looking back, I'm kind of realizing a lot of the reasons that I was surprised by this book and a lot of the reasons that it is different from what I thought that it was. One of the major differences in my experience this time was that I read it after the Iliad. Pro tip, read the Iliad first. I did not realize that this was a sequel when I read it for the first time, so I had not read the Iliad. I had no idea what really happened in the Iliad when I read the Odyssey, so please don't do that. Please read the Iliad first. And if you want to read the Iliad, I have a series of videos where I do a book study on the Iliad, so I can walk you through that and help you find it more relatable. If the Iliad sounds kind of scary and unapproachable, that's exactly what those videos exist to do, is to help you feel like the Iliad is much more approachable and relatable than you thought that it was. So other than having my expectations kind of set by the Iliad for this one, I now have this expectation of the Odyssey having a lot of kind of boring stretches and not holding my attention that well, since there were definitely areas on my first read, especially near the end, where I felt like I was kind of dragging myself through. I was ready for that to happen again. And the introduction to this translation is actually pretty interesting, because the translator talks about how he's not even sure that the same brilliant mind that created the Iliad could have also created the Odyssey, because of how many odd things there are in the Odyssey and inconsistencies and weaknesses, to put it bluntly. I think that's how the translator sees it. I think it's pretty clear that the translator thinks that the Iliad is better written than the Odyssey. So strangely enough, that kind of brought me into this book with the feeling of kind of wanting to defend it and wanting to see its strengths, since its weaknesses were kind of being pointed out in the introduction. I wanted to look at it kind of from a perspective of, is it really that much weaker than the Iliad? I don't know. So that kind of put me in a frame of mind to really be looking for the strengths in the Odyssey and understanding what the author was doing with it. So that brings us to round 2 of the realities of reading this, and I really did find myself more invested in the later chapters of the book. This time around, probably knowing more what to expect in them helped out. I kept kind of waiting for the chapters where not very much happens, and then that never really came. I felt like in every chapter something about the plot got advanced, something kind of interesting and memorable happened. So I didn't feel like it was quite as empty as I thought that it was before. And like I said, the context of the Iliad made all the difference, because this entire book is about homecoming from war and about how all of these other people that Odysseus fought with in the Trojan War got some kind of closure after that. Either they died or they went home. They had their homecoming, and that was a really big deal for them. But Odysseus is the only one who doesn't get his homecoming, because he's stranded out at sea for 10 years. He's wandering around, he's going to all these different places, he's dealing with all these obstacles, he's little by little losing all of his men, and he can't get home. It's like one of those bad dreams where you're trying to get somewhere and you just can't make any progress no matter what you do. And so he's just not able to get this closure after the war. He is stuck between the past, where he was fighting in the war, and any kind of new present or future where he could restart his life and go back to having some kind of normalcy. So that helped me to find this more relatable. And another helpful thing about the introduction is that it points out how the Iliad kind of depicted this golden age of heroism and epicness. In its decline, it kind of showed the sunset of that era, if you will, whereas the Odyssey is starting to show this kind of new post-war era that, like I said, feels more grounded and earthy, and it's more about what's going on at home. It's more about how to manage your household. It's more about how you're going to deal with your neighbors. Again, it feels more like it's dealing with the issues and concerns and goals of middle age versus young adulthood. And so I think that's why we see a lot less fantastical stuff in this book. There's a lot less interacting with the gods. Pretty much it's just Athena who shows up all the time, and even then she's pretty much just helping Odysseus with his personal life rather than dealing with the national aspects of Greece or Troy or any other nation. And what's really interesting about the fantastical stuff that's in this book is that that section of chapters 9 through 12 is Odysseus telling orally his own story of his travels and his adventures. So it's not the narrator telling us all this stuff, it's Odysseus telling us this stuff. And there are multiple other places in the book where Odysseus tells a story about where he's been and what he's seen and who he is, and it's all completely demonstrably false. So there's a little bit of this aspect where we as readers can be like, well, is that actually what happened to Odysseus? Are there any real fantastical elements in this story at all, or is Odysseus just a storyteller who thinks it's really fun to be clever and lie to people and make his life sound more interesting than it is? Is this just what he wants people to think actually happened to him during this time? So again, that feels like kind of a transition between the more, I guess, transcendent, epic view of the world that we see in the Iliad into the more home-like and earthy view of the world, or at least experience of the world, I guess, that is mostly pictured in the Odyssey. So to me, that just added a lot of intrigue and layers to the story, to be aware of all of those things and just have all of that to mentally chew on and make conspiracy theories about and whatnot. Also, I feel like I need to make a follow-up note here, because if you watched my Iliad read-along videos, you know that in part 2 of that read through, I talked quite a bit about Helen and how I was like, I don't remember what happens to her later in the mythology, but I hope that she gets some kind of a better situation, because I feel like she wants that. She messed up. She knows she messed up. She wants out of this bad situation. And I was just kind of hoping that something better would happen to her, but I was also kind of like, this is a Greek story. Greek stories are tragedies. It probably does not end well. But in the Odyssey, we find out exactly what happens to Helen, and this is a bit of a spoiler. It's in like chapter 3, so you can skip ahead if you would like to, but I don't think it's going to be too much of a spoiler. What happens to Helen is surprisingly positive. She helps Greece win the war while she's in Troy, and so once Greece wins, she gets to go back to Greece with her husband and her daughter, and is like completely reconciled to them, and is just living in her homeland, like in a palace and chilling out and living the good life. And I was just really surprised by this, because I thought all of these classical Greek figures like had tragic endings. I guess I should have known just from Odysseus himself and from Penelope, to give more spoilers. They don't have tragic endings either. There are actually quite a few pretty happy endings in this book, which kind of surprised me. I was not expecting that. So there you go. There's the ending of the Helen story as far as I know. And yeah, that kind of ties off that thread from that video about the Iliad. However, there is one character in this book who has a very tragic ending. And again, I don't want to spoil things for you too much, but there is a sad dog story warning. So if you are sensitive to sad dog stories, I don't know if you will be able to handle this book or not. It does have one of the most famous and devastating dog deaths in history, so just please be aware of that. Okay, those are my thoughts on the Odyssey. It's been really fun to walk through the Iliad and the Odyssey with you guys. I think I've enjoyed these books a lot more because I've known that I'm going to be talking about them with you and having a conversation, and it's helped me think more clearly about these books, to be like, okay, how am I going to communicate my thoughts on this? So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for voting in the poll. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that you have enjoyed it just as much. I hope that you've learned something new about the Iliad and the Odyssey, thought about them in a new way, maybe I'd encourage you to actually go back and read these or reread these. So if any of those are true, please let me know in the comments, and let me know what other classics I should talk about, what other classics you would like to hear about, expectations versus realities. Until I make those videos, see you guys next time. Bye!